Hi. The purpose for this video is to give a quick overview of some of the rental reports in AMT. So I'll just jump into AMT and just get out of here and jump into AMT. So I guess the first report we'll have a look at is just really around your tendering for coming up with what your plant rates are. AMT does what we call life cycle costing, so it'll forecast your costs, all your costs, capital costs, ownership, maintenance, for the entire asset's life cycle. So this is just a chart that shows your cumulative cost per hour over the life of the asset. So it's a high-level overview. Probably a more useful analysis one is where you analyze those life cycle costs. There's a number of ways that you can analyze it. I've just done it in a pie chart here by expense element. So these are generally would be your categories that you break your plant rate into, or your rental rate into these sort of categories. And it just shows the breakdown. So there's a number of ways that you can analyze these costs within AMT. Probably the main report around the rental performance in AMT is the Pnl Report. So this is this report can be run historically or for the future or both. So in this example, I've actually run it for both. So we're currently have just started May. So January to April is actuals, and then May through to the end of December is forecast. And we have our revenue broken down by these rental categories of typically depreciation, finance, insurance, major components. Each company, when you install AMT, you'll define what these categories will be, so it's entirely flexible. And then in the same breakdown, we then have your costs. So we have your revenue coming in, what your costs are, to give a subtotal. Now, if you are using the component depreciation or the provisioning functionality in AMT, then any transfers you've had in and out of those provision accounts or balance sheet accounts are shown in this section here. It's not compulsory. It really depends on what your accounting approach is. And that then gives you a net P&L. So that really, again, just sort of summarizes what AMT is doing. A couple of other useful reports. There's a revenue analysis report. Now, I'm just it's a little bit confusing, but I've run this twice, and I've got two examples of this report above here. The first report is, I've run it saying I want to see the forecast of revenue. So this is taking into account the probabilities of hiring the equipment out. So in some of your forecasts, you might have projects that are committed, some that are sort of potential, which is, and some that are probable. We break it into categories depending on the percentage probability that's been assigned. So this gives your forecast revenue taking into account those probabilities. This report is the same report, but it's run by what we call potential. And this is saying if you have your entire fleet 100% utilized or 100% under rental, committed rental projects, then what would your revenue be? So if we just take a month, say August, we've got the forecast is 134,000. But if we had the equipment all committed to rental projects, we would get 165,000. So that gives us a asset utilization or rental efficiency measure where you can see we're getting 134,000 out of the maximum that we could get of 165,000. So you could plot that maybe as a chart, as a percentage, to say that we're getting whatever that works out to be, 80% utilization or 80% efficiency on the rental. You can also run this historically to say, well, in the last year, what was the actuals that we got? What was the actual percentage efficiency that we achieved? Some of the other useful reports Just plant rate analysis. So I'll just make this one a little bit bigger so you can read it. And there's quite a few reports in AMT that are like this, where we are looking at what's your cost and what's your recovery by, in this case, by project and equipment. So what was the depreciation cost? What was its recovery? What was the maintenance labor cost? What was its recovery? So you can quickly identify where your plant rates are accurate and where they're not accurate, where they're too high or too low, or where you're having cost overruns. Again, it just highlights those variances, which is where you want to focus your energies. This is another report, very similar in the objective. Again, by equipment, we're looking at what's the cost, what's the revenue, over and under recovery by these different categories. The last report that I'll show is this Rivet Chart. So what the Rivet Chart does is it measures the percentage value in your components, and it forecasts that over time. So if we just take one of these, and each line here represents an equipment. So we've got 4 equipment that we've plotted out till the year 2019. So if we just take, say, this green line, we can see that currently the equipment has got about 38% of life left on its components, on average, as a weighted average. So the engine would count for a lot more than a turbo or something like that. Sorry, turbo is a wrong example. Suspension cylinder. But here you can see that it jumps up to 65% in this period here. So if you're looking to sell the equipment, you generally don't want to sell it when it's got a whole lot of brand new components, because you're unlikely to recover that cost that you've spent on it. But you also don't want to try and sell it when it's all in desperate need of repair. So this sort of gives you a couple of windows as to where you would be optimal times to quit that equipment. If you're somewhere here and you decide to keep the equipment, recognize that you're going to be in for a lot of cost, because that jump up in the residual value really means that you are planning on putting on replacing components, and so if you spend all that money, you probably want to have some rental period to recover that cost. So it just allows you to see the value in the state of the equipment, and to plot it over time to identify optimal windows if you're looking at when you should quit equipment. Okay, that's probably as much as what I just wanted to go through. I just wanted to highlight a couple of these key sort of rental reports. It's certainly not all of the reports. There's a lot of different performance reports and things within AMT. Okay, thank you very much.